Senator from Oklahoma.
First of all, I thank the Senator from Arizona for yielding. I ask unanimous consent that I be recognized in morning business for such time as I shall consume.
Without objection.
Mr. President, after weeks of global warming scandal, and we've talked about it on the floor, what happened in ClimateGate just prior to the Copenhagen Convention, I had the opportunity to visit and to uncover some of the things that we had suspected were going on for a long period of time. 5 years ago, I had the occasion of giving a speech on this floor, wherein I outlined from information that had come through the back door to me from scientists how bad the science was and how it had been in fact cooked. Then, of course, along came ClimateGate. After weeks of the global warming scandal, the world's first potential climate billionaire is running for cover. Yes, I'm talking about Al Gore. He's under siege these days. The credibility of the IPCC is eroding. The EPA's endangerment finding is collapsing. And belief that anthropogenic global warming is leading to catastrophe is evaporating. Gore seems to be drowning in a sea of his own global warming illusions. Nevertheless, he's desperately trying to keep global warming alarmism alive today. It's my understanding that tonight he's having a high-level meeting of all of his global warming alarmists around the country to see how they can resurrect this thing and how they can regroup. Now, consider Gore's nearly 2,000-word op-ed piece that recently appeared in the New York Times. It's a surefire sign of desperation. Gore's piece was about China, about solar, about wind power, globalization, the rising sea levels, all the scary stuff, big polluters, melting glaciers, and cap and trade. One searches in vain for my explanation of the IPCC's errors and mistakes, or of Phil Jones, the former director of the Climate Research Unit. That's in East Anglia. We've heard a lot about him. He was the one who was actually assembling a lot of the science, or so-called science, or creating the science, I should say, to support the position of those who believe that anthropogenic gases cause global warming. It was 7 years ago, I believe this month, that I had occasion to study on the floor and find out that, in fact, we had spent so much time on this thing that everyone was believing this to be true. And when we realized the science wasn't there, I made the statement that the notion that anthropogenic gases are causing catastrophic global warming is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on the American people. Well, what's Gore's take on the ClimateGate scandal? Climate scientists, he wrote, were besieged by an onslaught of hostile information requests from climate skeptics. That is nothing else. Well, even the IPCC announced last week an independent review of its process and procedures. You see, former Vice President Gore was saying that, oh, that was nothing, that was just a few comments. I might add that one of the largest and most respected publications in the UK, which is called the UK, I can't remember. Remember what that was? All right, I don't either. Anyway, one of the major publications over there said this is the worst scientific scandal of our generation. The UK Telegraph, that was what it was called. The Atlantic Monthly, the Financial Times, the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, Newsweek, Time, and many others are saying that this is a legitimate scandal, and reform of the IPCC is absolutely essential. Let's keep in mind what the IPCC is, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This is the United Nations. They put this thing together back in 1988 to try to scare people into changing our policy of this country. And by the way, I mentioned Time Magazine as one of the many magazines and publications that have now said, looking at this ClimateGate, the investigation should be there. This is the same Time Magazine, and I don't blame them for doing this. I would have done the same thing. Back in 1975 on the cover, they had another ice age is coming. We're all going to die. Then, of course, just a couple of years ago, they had, and you might remember this, that last polar bear standing on the last cube of ice, Mr. President, and says global warming is coming, we're all going to die. So anyway, the publications are coming around. When it comes to reform, when it comes to openness and transparency and peer review, and when it comes to practicing good science, Gore stands alone. He wants the world to put its head in the sand and pretend nothing's happening. It kind of reminds me of the story of the two boy ostriches chasing the two girl ostriches through the woods. And they're catching them. One girl ostrich said to the other one as they came up to a clearing, "What do we do?" And they said, "Well, let's hide." And so each of the girl ostriches stuck their heads in a respective hole, and the boys ostriches came galloping up to the clearing, and one looked at the other and said, "Where'd the girls go?" Well, this is what we're looking at here. They're hiding the head in the sand, and then they're writing, Gore's writing this op-ed piece that even if all these disasters won't happen, we still have to deal with national security risks and energy independence. Of course, Gore fails to mention that the United States leads the world in technically recoverable resources of oil, coal, and natural gas. According to a recent release from a report from the Congressional Research Service, America's combined recoverable natural gas, oil, and coal endowment is the largest on Earth. America's recoverable resources are far greater than those of Saudi Arabia, China, Canada, all combined. And that's without including America's absolutely immense oil, shale, and methane hydrates deposits. Now, it always is kind of humorous when people who are saying, well, we got to get rid of our oil and gas and our coal and those things which we're using to generate the energy necessary to run America. And they say, well, we've got to become independent. But they want to do away with all that. We have enough oil and gas and coal and now nuclear, which we're expanding, to take care of our needs so that we wouldn't have to be dependent upon any foreign country for any of our energy. We have enough here. The problem is a political problem, that the Democrats will not allow us to go ahead and explore our own resources and exploit them. We're the only country that doesn't do that. Now, Gore's got to know that the edifice of climate alarmism continues to crumble. So he's swinging for the fences, hoping for a home run to change the game. But Gore is striking out as he loses his support almost daily in Congress and from the American people. Let's face it, Gore's side of the argument is collapsing. He and his allies are running short on facts, and Gore's criticism of the recent events ring hollow. For example, after the ClimateGate scandal broke, Gore was asked by an online publication called Slate as what he thought of it. Gore's response was, well, I haven't read all the emails, but the most recent one is more than 10 years old. Of course, obviously that's not true because they go all the way up to 2009. So all he's left with is a two-pronged fork of anger and attack. Just read the New York Times op-ed piece. By the way, I was told that his op-ed piece in the New York Times was the 3 times larger than that which they normally will receive. He wrote that those who question climate alarmism are members of a criminal generation. That's me, a criminal. Criminal. Is Roger Pielke a criminal? Or how about Dr. John Christie of the University of Alabama, Richard Lindzen of MIT, Chris Landsea of the National Hurricane Center? No, they haven't been committed any crimes. They just want honest, open scientific debate. I might add that thus far, the only scientists who commit crimes are those at the CRU. Now, again, this is the collection point of all the science that the United Nations has put together in this thing called IPCC. Those involved in ClimateGate, according to the findings of the UK's Information Commissioner. Weekly Standard recently placed Al Gore on its cover. We have that right here. Showing that the emperor has no clothes. The cover story by Stephen Hayward of the Weekly Standard is entitled "Denial: The Meltdown of the Climate Campaign." Hayward writes a compelling narrative of ClimateGate and its consequences. This story is a must-read for anyone interested in the recent implosion of global warming alarmism. Let me mention something, because if you look at the movie, The Inconvenient Truth, the one where he made, I guess, most of his money, it talks about how the last sentence, I believe, are you willing to change